NBL Now, thanks to Code Sports on this Tuesday morning. We are at the end of 3 straight weeks of games here in the NBL, and what a time it has been. Joel Peterson alongside NBA champion, former Brisbane Bullets big man Aron Baynes this morning. Baynesy, good to see you, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, mate. It's been a extensive 3 weeks of games, and I don't know what I'm going to do tonight, fill up some hours after running around for the day, but we'll make the most of it anyway.
Yes, we might need to find a replay to watch or something like that. So last night, Sydney Southeast Melbourne, billed as two of the top defensive teams in the league. Of course, we know they can score the ball as well, these two, and oh, gee, did they show it. 124-117 in regulation, if you don't mind. So the highest scoring game this season without the need for extra periods. 6 Southeast Melbourne players in double figures. Kendrick Davis had a great game. What did you make of all of what transpired last night, Baynesy?
Yeah, not so much defense, right? It was one of those things that was billed as, will there be defense or will offense win out? And, for Sydney, I see the Kuol not being available and being out as a big, big loss for their motivation on defense. Daly's always going to give you that effort on defense, but for the rest of the guys, Kuol kind of gave a lot of energy and a lot of, he was the head of the snake on the defensive end. He'd pick up the best player on the other team, and Sydney overcame that for most of the game with Davis and, his offensive brilliance, but it's a tough one for him. He came down and they tried to let him play for the last 4 minutes with 4 fouls, and within a few seconds it came up. But, that's a credit to what Southeast Melbourne were able to do, getting downhill, putting pressure on the rim all night, and Foxwell was able to draw a quick one on Davis, which left Sydney with a bit of a deficit on the offensive end, which Melbourne were then able to pull away.
Brad Rosen said in commentary, it felt like a playoff game. Did you get that kind of vibe?
Yeah, well, it's kind of, there's emotions between Sobey and Davis, if nothing else, right? So the two best players on each team don't like each other straight away. There's going to be a bit of heated rivalry and some contest going on there, the playoff level. So, I saw that filter down to everyone within the game last night. And, one of the other guys is never going to back down as a Glover, and especially coming up against his old team.
Yeah, he's in great form again, Angus Glover. It was a real bounce-back game for him last night. Let's talk about Nathan Sobey. So potentially a career-best season at an advanced age now, 35 years old. You've obviously played with him both at national team level and at club level. Have you been surprised by what he's been able to do this season?
No, Jace mentioned it last night that the guy puts in more effort than most people on looking after their body. He's the type of guy that you go around and hang out with Sobe and his family, and at 4:00 in the afternoon, he's having a bowl of porridge just because he wants to eat the right way and, get some energy, but he doesn't want to put anything bad into his body. So he's the type of guy that, he'll sacrifice enjoying in the moment just so he can put out his best product on the floor. And that's what he's been able to do his entire career, and it's paying dividends for him now at this point as well. Those little things, those extra percentages that he puts in throughout his whole career have allowed him to keep growing and expanding his game and, staying as explosive and as physically ready as he is now at 35 as he was when he was, late 20s.
And DJ Mitchell gave them some real juice off the bench last night. Again, another of your former Brisbane Bullets teammates. What kind of role could he play down the stretch for Southeast Melbourne? Because he's a streaky shooter, but when he gets going, he can really fill it up.
That's the big benefit of having a guy like Sobes, right? He comes out and straight away he makes that basket look a lot bigger for all of the guys on their team. I don't know one guy who came on the floor and didn't think they could knock down a 3 last night. So, it's pretty exceptional having a leader like that, and everyone wants to follow. So, whether it's Glover or Hunter or, anyone on that list, they can all come in and add some quick buckets in a short amount of time. And that's also a credit to King and his system. He's about getting up the threes. And when you have a guy like Sobey drawing as much attention as he does and drawing as many defenders over towards him, it opens up whoever is available on that backside. And, there was a few guys that benefited from that last night.
Yeah, indeed they were. They were able to really fill it up, as we know. The Kings side of things, so I feel like they don't lose any friends out of that performance. And even their last one, having lost Quoll against Adelaide and then gone down narrowly in that game with the team that came over the top of them at the end. Last night they were in that game for a long time and they just couldn't sort of close it out.
Yeah,
Well, the
I
ball,
guess for me,
yeah,
I mean, yeah, you're speaking about Bull, and yeah, that's a massive loss. Like, depending on what his knee comes out as being, and we've talked about before the show that it might be the season that he's out for. What are they going to do? But you see what Gorgin's able to do as a coach and the adjustments he can make. I mean, you've lost an MVP during the game early on with Zave going out and rolling his ankle, and they were still able to make adjustments. And then, even at the end of the game when Kendrick goes out, you've still got the benefit of having a guy like Daly. He's had a bit of a slow year offensively, but last night he was 7 for 8 and was able to put up some really good points at key times and just give the guys the confidence. And, they stuck around, and that's where it gives them the ability. Guys like Roberts coming in and he's making big plays and big shots and drawing the defense. And that's the brilliance, I guess, of what Gorgin and Bogues are able to do with their basketball knowledge and having the right pieces around. It's a credit to what the Kings have been able to do. And, I'm a fan of Longley and what he's, added to the program as well. And it's you see they have all these little bits and pieces that they can find ways to make it work, even when they're not having the most luck on the injury front. So, it's scary when they're playing that well as a team and they're missing so many pieces. So, Zave is probably not going to be out that long. He had the ice on the ankle, so everyone's rolled their ankle, and we know it can be a pretty quick comeback from one of those. So they're going to add an MVP back to the lineup soon enough. They're going to have even more offensive firepower. So it's a scary thing for the rest of the league if they're playing that well with the numbers that they had last night.
So the defensive side of the ball seemed to be where they had a real ceiling, this Sydney Kings team. With Ball Quoll in the lineup, they could probably do things that a few other teams couldn't. Without him, do you think they look to replace him, or does it become a change of emphasis and they lean into the offensive firepower that they have now to maybe be the strength of this team down the stretch?
Yeah, they've got the offensive firepower regardless, right? They know that. The thing is that Daly, to me, has always been the head of the snake for whichever team I played with him on defensively. And, he's kind of changed his role since he got hurt and came back. And he's really found a way to generate his impact throughout the game within that role that he's had. But maybe that changes where, they put him back as the head of the defensive snake. And he's that guy that can really encourage the rest of the team to put their body on the line and put even more effort into the defensive end. So that's probably where I'd look to for them and what the defensive impact is going to be. Adding someone late in the season like this for a team that's, more often than not flowing right now, it can mess too much with the mojo. And for Sydney, I just see, they have the coaches and the knowledge within the game that the coaches have to just make a few different changes and shift a few little things around to get them back into keeping teams in that 85, 90 range, and they can always put the points on the board like we saw last night.
Yeah, it's a good insight. And of course, they tried to go down the import road late in the season last year. It didn't work out for them. So it'd be interesting to see what the Sydney Kings do. Before we move on to too many other topics, Hoopsfest is coming up in the West. It is only next week. It seems like it's been building for so long. So it is next week, hoopsfest.com.au for tickets and all the info, of course. Allen Iverson is coming down under Baynesy, which is very, very exciting. We know what he did in the NBA and what a figure within basketball, but also just within culture he has been over his years. And it raises the question, as a big fella growing up, who did you look up to? And then when you got to the league, who did you kind of have your eyes on? Who were your idols at an NBA level when you were coming through?
Mate, I guess that's a couple different areas within that question alone, right? AI's impact on the game, and it's spread throughout the culture, and, the baggy clothes, the oversized everything, the undershirts, the headbands off to the side and tilted, and the armbands as well, just multiple of those on. But, I was never into the headbands and the armbands, but the big shorts always sat well with me. It's that was kind of when I started playing basketball and got around. It was oversized clothes, and even nowadays we're starting to see the shift from the short shorts into some bagginess again, which favors me because I don't like being out there with too many tight shorts and tight shirts. So yeah, it's also good that the kids won't be wearing all the short things anymore. The bagginess is coming back to it. But in terms of which player I looked up to, Aaron Fern was my first coach that I had in the game of basketball when I was playing organized, and he told me to watch Tim Duncan. If I could do anything Tim did, I'm going to be on the right path. So I was fortunate enough that the first guy I ever looked up to, I got to win a championship along the side of. And it was kind of some really fun matchups between Timmy and, the Sixers. And it was that era when there was a lot of firepower, but it was, Tim's routine and his efficiency just shone through. And, they talk about the big fundamental, and that's what he was. Even when I was playing alongside him, that routine just kept him going and ticking over the box score, regardless of how many years he was playing. So it's fun. Hoopfest going to have AI out there, and he's going to be embracing the culture of what it is, because like I said, the bagginess is back, and that's his style. He's got the clean lines with the Reeboks, and he's got his Iversons coming out, which I wore some Iversons when I was first playing as well. So, that's a cool throwback, seeing some of the Reeboks coming through now with what he and Shaq are doing. But it's just going to be a fun atmosphere and a fun, I guess, Hoopsfest out there with everything they've got going on.
Yeah, it really takes over the CBD of Perth. We could do another hour on your upbringing and coming in through to the NBA and playing with Tim Duncan. We might have to do that at some point. But yeah, hoopsfest.com.au if you're thinking about it. WNBL action, of course, regular season games. Perth Lynx have got a couple of massive ones against Townsville and Bendigo over there as part of Hoopsfest. And then, of course, the Wildcats take on the Illawarra Hawks. Melbourne, Tassie, just some of the matchups to look for. So it's going to be awesome fun. So if you're thinking about it, jump on it and get to Hoopsfest only next week. So what an exciting time it is. We're coming off 3 weeks straight of games, Baynesy, so it gives us a little bit of time with no action tonight, just to reflect on what we've seen and what we've learned over the last couple of weeks. Of course, all of a sudden, Melbourne have hit a bit of a speed bump in their journey. Adelaide have lengthened out at the top of the table. We've spoken about this, the likes of the Sydney Kings and Southeast Melbourne. But is there one big takeaway among that top group of teams that you've got, having watched games every night for the past 21 days?
What was it? We got to go back to December 17th now till that was the start of it, and been enjoying basketball every single night. So yeah, like we touched on earlier, don't know what I'll do tonight, but when I look back at that and think about what it is, you talked about the separation, and just on the defensive end, they're able to stop that lower pack from scoring. There's so many 80-point games or separated games where there's 15, 20 points between the top teams and those lower teams. So, you see that there's some defenses available for every team, but offense is easier to pick up every single night. I guess that's what I saw, whereas, it's the teams that can focus on the defense at this time of year that defense is going to win championships, right? So that's where Tassie are looking pretty dangerous right now in terms of they're keeping teams to around that 80-point mark. And out of the top 6 teams right now, they probably play the best defense. They have the best offense consistently in terms of they have 4 or 5 guys every single night in double figures, and they're not so reliant on just the one guy. Yet they have the MVP of the league playing with them. So, they've got even more room on that offensive end as well. Yet, yeah. It's about who can lock into the defense, which is what we talked about with Sydney. They've got to change a couple of things. Perth really need to figure out what their identity is on the defensive end. And I'd look to Joe to be more of an anchor and a bit more of a leader on that defensive end for them if they're going to make that long run. So, to me, defense has to start locking in right now. There's not back-to-back games for guys coming up in terms of, they have a game, they travel, they have another game. There's less of that now after this 3 weeks, so the coaches can really lock in on the defense. And NBL is all about over-scouting, right? And you've seen a few teams, especially Melbourne, I think, have fallen victim to that in terms of what Edwards is able to do impacting the game. And so back to Melbourne, and no better coach in this league than Dean to figure out how to put him into the right situation and how and get more from the rest of the guys on their team. But yeah, I'm also looking for Melbourne to start playing that defense that we know has put them up towards the top of the pack every single year.
Is that what you're seeing with them that's fallen off, that defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of, for them, the offense is dictating how they play defense right now, and they haven't been able to hit the shots that you'd expect them to normally hit. I think they talked about last night during the coverage that it's the first time in years CG hasn't been on the 3-point leaders board. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a shift for Melbourne, but they can't live through their offense. They've got to find that motivation on the defensive end and build from there, which at this time of year, that's what Tassie's been able to do. It's kind of their defensive anchor, and Magne has had an offensive explosion over the last few games and just showing that defense gives not only yourself confidence, but the rest of your team. And yeah, to me, being a defensive-minded player throughout my career, I see the validity in that and what it does come late in the season. It keeps you consistent, regardless of how over-scouted you are. It's hard to play against a tough defense.
Yeah, it's a good point, well made. So, of course, Melbourne United get the chance to sort of kickstart their season tomorrow night. We'll talk about that in a moment. The Brisbane Bullets are a team. You and I sat courtside on Sunday at the Brisbane Entertainment Centre, Bainesy, and saw what was a really spirited performance from them. Unfortunately, you don't get any points for spirited performances, but it was a far more energised Brisbane than we saw previously against Perth in the same venue earlier in the weekend. There's no shortage of people that are sort of tossing their opinions out there about the Bullets situation. You've got a former coach in Brian Curl, a championship-winning coach, saying that there's a cultural problem at the club and a bit of a sort of a Band-Aid solution type mentality to what's going on there at the moment. You've got Darryl McDonald, who's sort of eyeing off that coaching job and the sort of the moves and the machinations around what will happen there. How would you approach the situation with the Bullets at the moment?
Yeah, look, Curl's coming from the golden generation of what the Bullets were able to do on court. He had some pretty good players around him at that point as well. But in terms of saying a Band-Aid solution, I'm not going to put that label on what DMAC is or what DMAC's about. So, yeah, it's kind of one of those things. If you're going to, try and cover up and figure out something short term, there's no better player than DMAC. There's no better coach than DMAC. And hopefully it's not just short term. He said it himself that he wants to be there. He has the respect of everyone around the league. He has the respect of the guys. He's able to draw in players that would want to come and play for a guy like that as well. So, yeah, I would hope that they can find some long-term solution to work alongside DMAC and give him the reins and give him the opportunity to build a team he sees fit just for that stability. And, I know the type of guy he is and the competitive nature. He doesn't like to lose. And you saw it within the last couple of games. He's upset about things that were happening on court, but he was able to maintain that and, refocus the guys when they came to the bench and keep them locked in. There was a few points in that game where they could have just fallen apart and gone back to how it was, but they were able to make some small adjustments and come out and get right back into the game and take the lead again. And, it's hard when you're playing against the MVP who's going to come out and pull up instantly and knock down some big threes and have, 14 points in about 6 minutes. So, it's a tough gig to keep the emotions up and the energy up in a team that's been struggling. But that's a credit to DMAC and the rest of the coaches in using an underutilized deep bench to go up there and put up a really good effort against the top team in the league. So, yeah, it was good to see. And unfortunately, Tassie's been winning a few more games, so there's a bit more separation. And mathematically, I'm not sure if they still have a chance. But, yeah, Mac's not going to stop playing regardless. And if that allows him to put in a bit of a system now and get some, I guess, continuity coming from the end of this season into the next, that would be a great thing.
So you mentioned the term long-term there. Do you feel like, and it may not satiate the fans and some people around the place, but do they need to take a sort of 2 to 3 year view of what's happening in Brisbane, as opposed to pushing all their chips in again and just trying to, sort of buy something?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's hard regardless of who's the coach, the culture changes every single time. And there's different emphasis that each coach is going to bring along to them. So, Brisbane having 7 coaches in 4 years, it's not helpful. Some of that this year especially has been injuries. You can't control a lot of those things, yet there's still that need to keep building towards what you want and what you can see. And yeah, I know the coaches I played for have had clear visions on what they want the culture to be here. It's just there's been a disconnect in terms of some of the messaging and then putting it into action during the game. So yeah, to me, long term is necessary to find something consistent and sustainable, which, yeah, it's hard for all of these coaches haven't really had a clean slate to come in and build their team yet. So hopefully whoever it is, I'm pulling for DMAC to be that guy. They get that longer term ability to step in and ride through some of those ebbs and flows and, show what they can do come the culmination of whatever that long term is.
Bainesy, any time we get you on, I'm just keen to throw as much as we can at you. So I'll give you a couple of quick ones here. We spoke about one of these briefly on Sunday. Who's your coach of the year at the moment? Mike Kelly, Josh King, Brian Gorgon, Dean Vickerman in the mix in terms of those top 4 teams. Scott Ross, you're sort of building a nice little defense there. John Riley's had a lot to work with out west this year. Who have you got at leading the coach of the year race?
To me, it's still Mike and Brian right now. It's a 2-horse race. I mean, Mike has separated himself even from the top teams, the other top teams in the league. And for me, what Brian was able to do over the last while in terms of you've got so many players on your team and putting them into the right role and finding success. If Kings can keep winning out, which, they've got a few challenges and obstacles to overcome now with Koal and Zave, and just redefining those roles again, especially on the defensive end. But if Sydney can keep winning out, then he's got a really strong case. But other than that, it's all Mike, I think. Just, yeah, he's got the MVP, but you've seen that just having a really good player doesn't give you wins. It's about trying to make that player make everyone better. And he's been able to make Bryce take a step not only for himself, but for everyone around him. We've seen it in the assists this year and just giving him control of the team. And it hasn't been in a selfish way. Bryce is the guy who can go out there and be selfish if he has to. We saw it the last couple of years where he tried being that unselfish guy at the start of the season with Perth, and they didn't get ticking until he became more of that selfish player. And it's been the opposite, and Mike's been able to put the system and style of play in for Adelaide to all take advantage of that, regardless of what their roles are. They all embrace it, and it's showing why they are the best team clearly every single night they step out on the floor.
Yep. I meant Mike Wells, of course. As someone who's on a podcast, I should be able to tell my mics apart, but my apologies there to Mike Wells. Okay, so tomorrow night when Ignite Cup action comes back, we'll have a bigger preview on tomorrow's episode of NBL Now here, thanks to Code Sports. We're in Bendigo. I'm looking forward to making the trip up to my hometown and standing up there in 41-degree heat on the sideline and hopefully not completely sweating through my suit. But can Melbourne get right in this one, Bainesy, or does Jack McVeigh carry Cairns to an unlikely win?
Look, we talked about, the last 3 weeks, what's it shown? It's showing the separation between the top teams. Melbourne's still one of those top teams, so they need to come out and, put the clamps on and put a statement victory out there to let everyone know that, hey, this is still the Melbourne United that have been perennial contenders. And, yeah, that's what I'm looking to them to do. And what better place than Bendigo, the WNBL teams on the top of the ladder as well out there in Bendigo. So, hopefully Melbourne can try and find some of that for themselves when they go in there. But there's no better way to play than go in and spoil someone's year by, when your season's not been going well, this is the time of year to go out there and make everyone else, come down a notch or two as well. So I'll be looking at Jack and the Taipans to be able to go out there and spoil it for Melbourne as well.
Yeah, a different kind of heat to what Cairns are used to in Bendigo tomorrow. Certainly won't be anywhere near as humid. So that's going to be all kinds of fun. Baynesy, always great to get your thoughts, mate. Good to see you, and look forward to catching up to you again soon.
Sounds good, mate. Appreciate you guys having me.
NBA champion Aron Baynes with us on NBL Now, thanks to Code Sports, of course, your number one source for everything basketball throughout the course of the season. Mick Randall, Matt Logan, the crew, bringing you all the exclusive behind-the-scenes access that you need this NBL season. Of course, no NBL tonight, which all feels a little bit strange, but we'll be back tomorrow with more NBL action here in this ever-intriguing NBL season.